right, hello. So this is going to be a series of videos going through the endocrine system. This is chapter 18 for AMP2 at Panola College. So the the endocrine system is going to be composed of the endocrine glands that are located throughout the body. We'll go into detail on what these endocrine glands are a little bit later. These glands will synthesize and secrete molecules called hormones that will communicate with and control other body cells. Okay? This communication is possible because body cells display various cellular receptors for specific types of hormones. Okay, so for example, if you look over here to the right, skeletal muscle cells will have receptors for testosterone. Okay, this testosterone right here, and testosterone will cause skeletal muscle to augment in size. Okay, so that's an example of specificity coming into play when it comes to cells and hormones. Another example is osteoblasts. Remember, osteoblasts from AMP1 are those bone cells responsible for building bone. And these cells will have receptors for parathyroid hormone. Okay, and we'll learn a little bit later what parathyroid hormone does, particularly in concert with another hormone called calcitonin. Okay, but that's another example. Our third example down here, adrenal cortex cells will have receptors for adrenocorticotropin hormone, otherwise known as ACTH. Okay, so these are three examples of three different types of cells that have receptors, specific receptors for three different hormones. Okay, cells that have specific receptors for a hormone are called target cells. So the target cells in these three examples here would be the skeletal muscle cells, the osteoblasts, and the adrenal cortex cells. Each hormone will differ in its target cells and thus the cellular activities that it will regulate. Okay. Now, how is it possible for endocrine glands to secrete hormones that control cells, which are often far away? Okay, if you have a hormone secreted in the hypothalamus, for instance, which is in the brain, how does that hormone get from the brain all the way down to the adrenal gland, which is on top of the kidney? The answer to that is they're going to be transported from the endocrine gland in question to the target cells by the blood. Okay, so in addition to the blood carrying things like oxygen and carbon dioxide, it's also going to carry hormones from different areas of the body to others. Okay, endocrine glands lack ducts. Okay, we'll learn about this in contrast with exocrine glands a little bit later. But hormone molecules are released from the glands into the interstitial fluid and then enter the blood within capillaries. Okay. All right. So here's a kind of a representation over here on the left. You see the endocrine gland here in question is secreting endocrine hormones into the bloodstream. Excuse me. And those hormones will be carried via circulation to another area of the body. Well, they will then exit to the target cell, via capillaries. So you have capillaries that are responsible for the hormones getting out of the endocrine gland and into the bloodstream, and then out of the bloodstream into a target cell. Okay. These hormones are transported via the cardiovascular system to all body tissues. This process is relatively slow. Okay. So that's a key thing to kind of keep in mind here. This word here, slow, is going to be pretty representative of how the endocrine system acts. Okay, so just keep that in mind. The hormones will then leave the blood through capillaries and enter the interstitial fluid, which gives hormones access to all body cells. So, as just stated before, you have capillaries. Let me get a darker color here. Capillaries responsible for hormones exiting the endocrine glands, and then capillaries down here responsible for those same hormones getting access to all body cells. Okay. The hormone binds to its cell's receptor in one of two places. It's going to bind to its cell's receptor within the cell or on the plasma membrane. Depending on the type of hormone that we are talking about, we will talk about the different classes of hormones. That hormone will bind in one of those two places. Okay? The binding will then initiate or inhibit metabolic activity within the cell. This activity is long-lasting and may continue after removal of the hormone. That's another key aspect or characteristic of the endocrine system, is that when you remove that hormone, the effects will continue afterwards. Okay. So keep these two things in mind, the fact that effects will continue after removal and that the process is relatively slow. Okay, let's talk about the different types of intracellular communication. So to preserve homeostasis, remember homeostasis is biological or biochemical equilibrium and balance. Cellular activities must be coordinated throughout the body. Cells will coordinate their activities by sending and receiving chemical messages. The nervous and endocrine systems will regulate this coordination. Okay, so this here, I think we did go over this briefly in AMP1, that the nervous and endocrine systems are going to be the two chief body systems responsible for regulating homeostasis. Recall that all of the body systems will play a role in preserving homeostasis, but these two are going to be your captains, quote unquote. Okay, if you've ever played team sports, okay, and you have to elect captains of your team, they have, special responsibilities when it comes to, the success of the team. And if you were to elect or designate two captains for the human body, those two captains would be the nervous system and the endocrine system. Okay, so we'll talk more about these two systems a little bit later. However, they provide different kinds of coordination because of the ways their cells communicate. So the first type of communication that we're going to talk about is direct communication. Here, transmission will occur through gap junctions. The chemical mediators are ions, small solutes, and lipid-soluble materials. Okay? So ions, small solutes, and lipid-soluble materials. Direct communication is going to be highly specialized and relatively rare. So direct communication in principle, is something that doesn't happen that often in the human body. This is typically going to occur between cells of the same type. Okay, so you can see here, two cells, identical, will communicate via gap junctions for direct communication. Okay, so same cell type for direct communication. All right, our second type of communication is paracrine communication, and here transmission will occur through extracellular fluid. Okay. The chemical mediators are going to be called paracrines, as the name paracrine communication suggests. Paracrine communication is localized and occurs when concentrations are relatively high. Okay, so this is an important point here. Okay, this will occur when concentrations are relatively high. Target cells must have the appropriate receptors. And here, this will typically occur between different cell types within a single tissue type. Remember that tissues are made up of cells, and there are certain types of tissues that have, different cell types. Okay? So that's your paracrine communication. Autocrine communication. Here in autocrine communication, transmission occurs through the extracellular fluid, the chemical mediators. If we follow this same model up here for paracrine communication, will be called autocrines. And here, the messages will affect the same cells that secrete the messages. Okay, so you think about autocrine communication. I just think about autographs. Okay, so autograft is going to be a transplant procedure where one type of tissue is transplanted from one area of the body on a particular individual to another area of the body on that same individual. Okay, so autocrine, autocrine communication will involve messages from cells affecting those same cells. Okay. All right. All right. Here we get to our last two types of communication. We have synaptic communication and endocrine communication. Synaptic communication, if you recall, is what is going to occur in the nervous system. Okay, so here we are starting to compare and contrast the nervous system with the endocrine system. Okay, so in synaptic communication, transmission will occur through, transmission will occur, typo here, just say transmission should occur across synapses. Okay, chemical mediators are neurotransmitters. Neurons will release neurotransmitters at a synapse. This is a synapse right here. Okay, and you got your neurotransmitters here. And this will lead to action potentials propagated along axons. Okay. This will allow for high speed. So take note of that particular term there for the nervous system, high speed messages to reach specific destinations. This is ideal for crisis management. If you need a signal to get to an area of the body very, 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 very rapidly, synaptic communication is the way to go. Okay, and note here, okay, for the nervous system, synaptic communication, you have high speed messages, whereas back here, for the endocrine system, we had slow transmission. Okay, so we're going to outline the differences once again between the endocrine and nervous systems, but I just wanted to draw that contrast now. In endocrine communication, transmission will occur through the bloodstream, as we previously stated. The chemical mediators are hormones, and target cells are primarily in other tissues and organs and must have the appropriate receptors. So as we have discussed already, endocrine glands will secrete endocrine hormones into the bloodstream. That is what is being depicted here. And endocrine hormones will typically alter metabolic activities. Okay. All right. So we've gone through the 5 different types of intracellular communication, and now we need to focus in on this type of communication right here, endocrine communication, and that will be our focus for this particular chapter. Okay? So recall that the 2 systems that have the most influence on homeostasis is the endocrine and nervous systems. Okay? Like the nervous system, the endocrine system will control and monitor organs, glands, and processes in the body. And these 2 systems have a somewhat loving and intimate relationship, and they will work together like a husband and wife do in a household to regulate various bodily functions, but they act in very different ways. Okay, so for example, my lovely wife and I been married for almost 14 years now. We operate in very different ways. Okay, but we're able to come together to run what I would like to think is an effective and efficient household. Okay, so the nervous system, as we stated before, will act quickly through electrical impulses, but its effects are short-lived. Okay? So that's going to be kind of the short and quick profile for the nervous system. For the endocrine system, this system is going to act slowly through the release of hormones, and its effects are longer lasting. So as you can see here, both of these systems have their pros and their cons. The nervous system will act quickly, that's a pro, okay? But its effects are short-lived, that's a con, all right? Endocrine system will act slowly, that's a con, but its effects are longer lasting, that's a pro, okay? So again, they know their limitations, their strengths and their weaknesses, and they are able to act accordingly to run an efficient and effective human body. Okay. All right, more on the relationship between the endocrine and nervous systems, more comparisons here. So again, communication method for the endocrine system is going to be hormones. For the nervous system, it's going to be neurotransmitters. So I'll just underline that real quick. So hormones, neurotransmitters. Okay. Target of stimulation for the endocrine system is going to be any cell in the body with the receptor for the hormone. The nervous system will be other neurons, muscle cells, and glands. We've already talked about how the endocrine system is slow and the nervous system is fast. Okay? Endocrine system, its range of effect, widespread effects throughout the body. Nervous system, localized, specific effects in the body. Duration of response, long lasting, okay, minutes to weeks. In the nervous system, it's going to be short lasting, milliseconds. Okay. And then the effect of removal, response will continue with the endocrine system. the response will terminate with the nervous system. Okay, so lots of distinct differences between these two systems. All right, functions of the the endocrine system, The endocrine system can communicate with any body cell that has a receptor for a hormone. Consequently, its functions are very diverse and can be organized into the following four broad categories. So number one, we have regulation, which will include development, growth, and metabolism. Hormones will have roles in cell division and differentiation. They will also control both anabolic. So remember these terms from AMP1. Anabolic is synthesis or building up, and catabolic is degradation or breaking down. Okay? So hormones will control all of these particular processes. Homeostasis. Hormones will control the amount of substances dissolved in the blood and blood volume. Okay? When it comes to the topic of homeostasis, we're going to talk about two processes in particular. The first of which is how blood calcium is regulated, and the other is blood glucose. Okay, so we'll talk about two sets of hormones that will regulate the blood levels of these two substances. Okay. Digestion. Several hormones will influence both the secretory processes and the movement of materials through the GI tract. So hormones will be responsible for what we call satiety, okay, and also hunger. Okay, so we'll talk about that. And then reproduction, hormones will affect both development and functions of the reproductive system and expression of sexual behaviors. Okay. So these are your four main broad categories of endocrine functions for the endocrine system. All right, excuse me. So the endocrine system is a collection of organs and small glands that will directly or indirectly influence all functions of the body. Okay? These direct or indirect influences come about, what should be an S there? Will come about through different pathways, which we will examine in detail during this chapter. Some of the glands, such as the hypothalamus, the pituitary, which is this organ here, the adrenal gland, I'll do that in a different color, that's this gland right here, and the pineal glands are also part of the nervous system. This gland right here, this is your thyroid gland, and this gland right here, this is your pancreas. Okay. The overlap, and by overlap, we're talking specifically about how these glands here, okay, are both endocrine organs and nervous system organs, will allow the two systems to further integrate their responses. Okay. All right. So the endocrine system is made up of ductless glands called endocrine glands. Okay. Endocrine glands will secrete hormones, which are chemical messengers, directly into the bloodstream, and this makes them glands of internal secretion. So what this means is that an endocrine gland when it secretes a hormone, okay, it will secrete it directly into the bloodstream. There is no tube or passageway or duct for that hormone to go through. Okay, it goes directly from the endocrine gland. So all of these, cells right here, this represents endocrine tissue. And those endocrine hormones will make their way directly from the endocrine gland and into the bloodstream. Okay? Endocrine glands, I'm sorry. So this makes them glands of internal secretion. So that means that they're secreted directly into the bloodstream. And so we're going to contrast this with exocrine glands a little bit later. Okay? Endocrine glands will include the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, thyroid, pancreas, adrenal glands, and then the gonads. So your gonads are your reproductive organs. Those are going to be your ovaries and your testes. Okay. All right. So you see the relative placement of all of the different endocrine glands in the human body. Okay. So you see the thyroid. Well, we'll start up here with the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is this particular region right here in the brain. Pituitary gland is just inferior to that and has 2 lobes that secrete a host of different hormones, which we will talk about. The thyroid gland is right here, anterior to the larynx in the neck. Parathyroids are going to be on the posterior aspect of the thyroid glands. Okay, we'll see those in just a bit. Adrenal glands will help to trigger the fight or flight response. They are located directly on top of the kidneys. Okay. Pancreas is right here. And actually the pancreas, this particular image, I don't know why they do it like this. But the pancreas is actually up here in this region. So this image is not anatomically correct, but the pancreas will be responsible for regulating level of sugar in the blood. Testes will secrete male sex hormones, namely testosterone. And then the ovaries will secrete female sex hormones such as progesterone and estrogen. Okay. All right, so we talked about endocrine glands. Remember here, they are ductless. They release hormones directly into the bloodstream. They are glands of internal secretion. Now, exocrine glands, by contrast, are going to be made up of glands with ducts. Okay? And these exocrine glands will release secretions through ducts. Duct is just a passageway or a tube to one of 2 places: the body surface or other organs. Okay? So the bottom line here, ladies and gentlemen, is that an exocrine gland will secrete hormones into a duct. This is a duct right here. And that duct will then lead to, it can lead to another cell. It can lead to the body's surface. But the point here is you have ducts that the hormones will travel through. Over here, for endocrine, the gland will secrete hormones directly into the bloodstream. So there are no ducts. Okay? All right, examples of exocrine glands and their secretions include things like the sweat glands, which secrete sweat, the salivary glands, which secrete saliva, the mammary glands, which secrete breast milk, lacrimal glands, which secrete tears, and the pancreas, which secretes digestive enzymes. Okay. The pancreas actually is both an exocrine gland and an endocrine gland. We will talk more about that later. But it is an endocrine gland because it releases insulin directly into the bloodstream, and that will regulate sugar levels. It is an exocrine gland because it releases digestive enzymes into ducts that will break down food. Okay? If you ever see a question about an organ that is both an exocrine and an endocrine gland, pancreas is what you want to think about. All right. There are other organs in the body that are both endocrine and exocrine, namely the liver is another example of that, but the pancreas is that classic example. Okay. All right, more on hormones. Hormones are defined chemical substances released from one tissue and transported by the blood to reach target cells in other tissues. Okay. Once the hormones reach their target cells, they exert regulatory effects, which can be either stimulatory or inhibitory on cellular processes. Hormones, which are proteins, okay, are products of the central dogma. This is your central dogma over here. And remember this from AMP1, that DNA will lead to the formation of RNA, which will lead to the formation of proteins, which will lead to cellular actions. Okay? So hormones are one of the many, many products of that central dogma. Just a couple more slides for this video, then we will stop. So a little bit more on hormones. Receptor regulation. The activity of hormone receptors can be either upregulated, that is increased, or downregulated. This will make the receptors more or less sensitive to the hormone in question. Exercise will upregulate insulin receptors, making them more sensitive to insulin. So this is an example of receptors being upregulated. The upregulation of insulin receptors will promote the uptake of glucose. Okay? So an important concept to kind of get in your mind when it comes to glucose is that glucose is going to do the most harm if it is in the bloodstream. If glucose is in the bloodstream, that means that tissues around the body cannot use it, okay, because it's floating around in the blood. So what insulin does is going to take that glucose and it's going to bring it into different tissues around the body, okay? So that's why insulin is so important. This means that less insulin is needed to promote glucose uptake in people that are physically active. This is one of the many reasons why physical activity and exercise is so beneficial. Okay? Less insulin you need to take in glucose, the better. However, conversely, obesity, in addition to cardiovascular disease, sedentary lifestyle, things of that nature, will downregulate insulin receptors so that more insulin is needed to promote glucose uptake by cells. So if you need more insulin to bring glucose into cells, that means that you have a greater risk for insulin remaining in the bloodstream, and that is where diabetes can arise or comes from. Okay. So that's just an example of upregulation and downregulation of hormone receptors. All right, let's stop here. Okay, so this will conclude the first video for the endocrine system. The second video, we're gonna start off by talking about the 3 branches of hormone secretion control. All right, thank you so much.